Hey guys, Comics Kid 2099 here. I've got a book that I finished reading and I would like to talk to you guys about it. The book is Uncanny Avengers Volume 2, The Apocalypse Twins. Just a little quick note, I did not know that was going to be like the name of the story. I thought that The Apocalypse Twins was just something that like the fans of the series just took to naming those characters that. I had no idea that that was an official thing. So that was kind of interesting. A while back, probably over a year ago, it was probably late last year, I read and reviewed Uncanny Avengers Volume 1, and I hated it. And I think after reading this volume, by the way, I like this volume a lot more than I did Volume 1. I think if I went back and reread Volume 1, I would like it more than I did the first time, but I don't think I would like it as much as I did this volume. I think largely the biggest reason that I did not like Volume 1 was because I had certain expectations in mind, and I wasn't even looking into this book that much. I wasn't like reading interviews and stuff like that and summaries of the plot. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just looking at like the cover of one of the first issues, and I was saying, okay, it's probably going to be a half X-Men, half Avengers team. And what it really was like 2/3 Avengers and 1/3 X-Men. And at the time, I wanted another X-Men book. I wanted X-Men and Avengers getting equal time, and since I wasn't getting that, my expectations weren't being met. I was very disappointed. And also, there was just some stuff about it I didn't like about the plot. I don't really like Captain America as a character. I've realized that somewhat recently. He's a character I don't think I've ever really liked him. I've always tried to give him a fair shake, and there have been times where I've liked him more than other times, but in reading that volume and this volume also, I realize he is almost all of the time, every time he shows up in a story that I read, he's always got this holier-than-thou attitude, where he thinks he's better than all these people who he's being really judgmental toward. And every time he shows up in an X-Men book, that is the position that he plays. I can think of 2 or 3 times where he was in a story with the X-Men, and he's always saying stuff like, I don't trust those mutants over there, or stuff like that. And he tries to say, I'm not racist towards mutants, I just don't trust you because of something that you've done. But it's pretty clear to me that he just doesn't like mutants. And some people say, well, that's okay, he admitted it. Well, admitting that you have a problem doesn't mean that the problem goes away. And I'm sure that like 100 Captain America fans, if they saw this, they would all call for my blood. I don't care. I don't like Captain America. So that's something that is out there now. People can just deal with it, whatever. So I realized I liked this volume a lot more than Volume 1. I think part of it, the villains are much more interesting. And the thing is, there's just no way that this could have been the opening of the series, but if it was, I think I would have been much more excited about the rest of the series. But you had to set up that the Apocalypse Twins are getting kidnapped by Kang, and that happened in like issue 1 of Volume 1. And then in taking a few issues of break from that King story, you're kind of giving the audience a chance to forget that that happened, and then you return to it in full force, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And also, the Apocalypse Twins, we miss a lot of their backstory. We get it in dialogue. We hear them talk about their backstory, and we do get one issue here that I'll talk about in a minute that kind of shows a little bit of their backstory, but part of their origin story involves something that the Red Skull will be doing in the future. And so this series had to set up the Red Skull as being kind of a major threat for this team in Volume 1, and it had to do so in a certain way. It couldn't just take the Red Skull as he was, it had to kind of reinvent the character a little bit for this series. So I understand why Volume 1 had to deal with the Red Skull and the S-Men. That is really one of the dumbest names. I get that it's trying to be a parody of the X-Men, but I was thinking about this earlier, and they should have just called themselves the Brotherhood of Humans. That would have been a much better title. It would have been kind of a play on the Brotherhood of Mutants, and like I say, it would have been a better title for their team. The S-Men is just really dumb. But anyway, all of that stuff, you kind of had to set it up in Volume 1 before you could get to what is, in my opinion, the much better stuff in Volume 2. So basically what happens here is that Kang the Conqueror is a time-traveling warlord, and he's been a major villain for the Avengers pretty much since the beginning, I think. I don't know when he first appeared, but he's been kind of a major pillar of the villain community of the Marvel Universe for a long time. He's fought the Fantastic Four, he's fought the Avengers, and he's actually had several different identities over the years. And he kidnapped the two children of Archangel, and that whole storyline dates all the way back to Uncanny X-Force, also written by Rick Remender, who writes this series. He kidnapped those two infant children, and then he took them to the future and basically made their lives a living Hades. And he was trying to train them to become the protectors of mutant kind. And he kept telling them, if you have a soft and easy life, you're not going to be able to protect mutant kind. You will fail in your mission. And I still don't entirely understand what Kang's objective is, because he doesn't want to do what he's telling them that he wants to do. They keep thinking that he is training them to protect mutant kind, but I'm 99% certain that he doesn't actually care about mutants. So I'm still a little fuzzy on what it is that he is actually trying to achieve. And a few times they even mention that he has his own agenda, but I still don't know what it is. And I'm certain that that will be dealt with in Volume 3. That kind of reminds me, somebody online said, you have most writers who will write for the trade, where if you read an issue and then wait a month and read an issue and do that for 5 or 6 months, that you're going to forget a lot of stuff and it may not make a lot of sense to you, but then if you go and read the entire trade, it's going to make a lot more sense to you. And those writers, they write for the trade. Somebody online said Rick Remender writes for the omnibus, where you have to read everything that he did, and maybe not even necessarily just in this series. You might have to go back to some of the other stuff that he's read or that he's written just to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I don't mind that when it's just one series. Like, if I had all of Uncanny Avengers and I read it all front to back, all 25 issues of it or whatever, and it made more sense than I was doing here where I'm reading like one volume a year, I wouldn't mind that, because a lot of writers do that, and they've been doing that for a long time. Where I have issue with that is that you have to go back and read Uncanny X-Force to find out what the deal is with Archangel and his two kids. A big problem that I had with Volume 1, at the time, I had not read Uncanny X-Force, and so I was really confused. Who are the Apocalypse twins? When did Archangel have these kids? That's dealt with in Uncanny X-Force, and frankly, I think that Remender could do a better job of making this series stand on its own a little better. Maybe there's Avengers fans out there who don't care about the X-Men. In fact, I guarantee you that there are Avengers fans out there who don't care about the X-Men. I know several of them. And so those people, maybe they don't want to go back and read 30 issues of Uncanny X-Force just to find out where these kids came from and what their origins are. Now, this book does an alright job of catching you up on it. They tell you that Archangel is their father. They tell you who the mother is. You even see the mother in this book. But it's still a little confusing. It was for me when I read Volume 1. And also, if you've never read Uncanny X-Force, you're not going to know what the circumstances were behind these kids being born. And I think that maybe Remender could do a better job of making Uncanny Avengers as a series stand on its own without needing to be propped up by Uncanny X-Force. That's one problem that I still have, even though I enjoyed this book a lot more than I did Volume 1. So anyway, these kids, they are raised in a heckish kind of environment, and then they are sent back in time, or actually, somehow they manage to escape from Kang. I don't really know how. And they come back in time, and they start kind of causing trouble. Basically, they are saying, we are going to save the mutants from the humans. And what we are going to do, we're going to separate them. We're going to have the mutants over here, and we're going to have the humans over here, and then everyone will be happy. The mutants don't have to deal with these evolutionary throwbacks, and the humans don't have to deal with these people who they are afraid are going to replace their species one day. I don't entirely buy what they're telling. Specifically, they're trying to sell this to the Scarlet Witch. That's what they're telling her that they are going to do. I don't entirely buy it, because at one point in the book, a little bit of a spoiler, but they massacre hundreds of human beings. They kill a whole bunch of human servants who were once upon a time mutants who served Apocalypse. And they kill all of those guys, and I keep thinking, if you actually succeed in separating the mutants from the humans, I have a feeling you would just kill all of the humans. But we don't know if that's actually going to happen. That's my theory. Another problem that I have with this book is that it ends on a cliffhanger, and that goes back to Rick Remender doesn't write for the trades, he writes for the omnibus. And if I was reading all 25 issues of this series all at once, it would make a lot more sense. I don't necessarily like that. There have been other series where you can read each issue and it makes sense on its own, but then when you read all of the issues together, it makes a lot more sense. There's another layer to it. For example, Grant Morrison's New X-Men was like that, especially in the early years of that series. You could read any given issue, and it would make a certain amount of sense. But then when you read all of the issues, you would see these subplots that were building throughout the entire series and didn't get handled or didn't get a payoff until the very end of the series. I wish that Remender was a little bit more like that, where if you read an entire 5 or 6 issues of this series, then you will get a certain sense of completion where, okay, this story makes sense by itself, but then if you read all of the stories together, then there's another layer to it. I wish that he would do something a little more like that. Instead of making me feel like I'm going to the movies and then I'm being kicked out of the theater halfway into the movie and I have to wait 6 months or more to see the rest of the movie. I really don't like that feeling, but again, that's his style, and I guess he's never going to change that style. So maybe that's something that I have to get used to, but personally, I don't really like it. A few other minor complaints. I can already tell that it's going to be really hard to keep up with all of the alternate timelines and stuff in this series. By my count, there's 3, maybe 4 timelines that you have to deal with in this series. The first is the main Marvel Universe, where most of the stories take place. Then there is a possible future where the Red Skull takes over everything and he imprisons mutants in concentration camps. And it's very similar to the Days of Future Past timeline, but it's a little bit different. And the Apocalypse Twins, they spent a good deal of time in that future. Kane took them there to kind of let them be hardened and become more fierce warriors so that they could better protect mutant kind. And then you've also got this alternate timeline that I guess is the Age of Ultron timeline. I didn't read Age of Ultron. I had no desire to read Age of Ultron. I highly doubt that I ever will, unless it was just like given to me for free. I really don't see myself paying any amount of money for that story. Everything that I heard about it just sounded really bad. And there's one issue in this book that is set in that world. And fortunately, Rick Remender does a really good job of making me not have to go and read Age of Ultron. So for the most part, I don't feel completely lost and confused when I'm reading this tie-in issue to Age of Ultron. It mostly focuses on a few of the characters from the Uncanny Avengers team, Rogue, Havoc, and Colonel America in that timeline. And it kind of shows what their lives are like in this alternate timeline, but really, it's not even from the perspective of them. It's from the perspective of the Apocalypse Twins, and this is when they were younger. They were probably like 13 or 14 at the time, and we get to see kind of just a flashback in their lives, and it happens to be set in an alternate timeline, and if you were reading Age of Ultron, this would be a nice little bonus, because you get to see a little bit more of that world if you were a fan of that story. Personally, since I have no desire to read Age of Ultron, this stood well enough on its own, this particular issue. Having said that, it's a little confusing when you've also got these 3 or 4 other timelines. Like I said, there's the Age of Ultron timeline, the timeline where the Red Skull takes over the planet, and then the main timeline, and then there's one issue where it's a flashback to like 1000 AD, and Thor fights Apocalypse. And that one is very necessary. I just wish that it didn't spend an entire issue on that fight. I don't really know how else they could have done it, but they did that, and so problem here is that this book is like 6 issues, and you get to, wow, my eye is watering, my allergies are acting up like crazy. You read this book, and like the first 2 issues out of like 6 don't feature the Uncanny Avengers. The first issue is just Thor fighting Apocalypse, and then the second issue is the one that focuses on the Apocalypse Twins in an alternate reality. And then it's not even until the 3rd issue that you actually get to see the Uncanny Avengers doing stuff. That's a little bit of a problem, but since one of these issues was, it was like labeled 8A or something like that, Uncanny Avengers 8A, I don't really... Marvel's numbering system is one of the dumbest things in the world, where they do this .1 nonsense. I don't get it. So I guess 8A was actually supposed to be read after issue 8, but what they did, they have issue 6 of the series, then 8A, and then 7, 8, 9, and I think it goes up to 10. Oh, 11. So anyway... I don't really have a whole lot to say here. There's still some problems with this series, but I am liking it a lot more now than I was originally. And also, part of that may be that I'm softening in my hatred of the Avengers. I used to be I hated the Avengers. I just didn't care for them. I really didn't understand why everyone else in the world liked them. I don't hate them as much now, But still, in reading this, there's like 3 Avengers characters in this book that I really can't stand. Captain America, the Wasp, and Scarlet Witch. I really don't like those characters. They're really kind of snotty to the rest of the X-Men characters that are in this book, and I'm a huge X-Men fan, so a lot of we're better than the X-Men. A lot of that just feels really like I just want to reach in there and punch them in the face, but whatever. The book is getting better, I think. This is leaps and bounds ahead of Volume 1, in my opinion, but maybe if I read Volume 1, I would like it a lot more. I have a feeling I would, but also there was just a lot of stuff in that volume that I really didn't care for. So I'm kind of excited to read Volume 3 now. So that's something that I didn't think I would ever say, because way back when I reviewed Volume 1, I was still on the fence about whether I would keep going with the series. I hated it just enough that I really did not want to pay full price for the book, and I should mention I didn't. I got this on bargain. This was this was a gift for me for my birthday. So I saw it on bargain, and then someone got it for me for my birthday. So I didn't have to pay anything for this, and that might have something to do with it. Even if I did buy it, though, this was only $10 instead of like $25. So that might have also had something to do with it, where instead of paying $25 for 5 issues, you're paying $10 for like 6 or 7 issues. That's a better deal, and so that probably would have had something to do with it. But also, I legitimately do think that this is just a better story than the introduction of the Red Skull in the series. So that's about all I have to say. I hope that you guys found this review to be helpful, and I hope that you guys, if you've read this book, I hope that you liked it as much as I did. And I will be seeing you guys Saturday with a review of an episode of Batman the Animated Series. So, until then, I'll catch you guys later. Have a great day.